Hey everyone, it's Joanna here from Inspired by Stamping, and I'm so excited for our November release. Today is day 1, and I'm going to be sharing with you how to create this beautiful embossed background using some distress markers. So here's our newest stamp set today that we're releasing, our Snowflake Wonder. Some beautiful snowflakes that I've hand drawn, and also a great sentiment. There's a set of 7, and this is a 4x4 size stamp set. So we're going to concentrate on these beautiful snowflakes. We're going to emboss them, and then we're also going to use our distress markers. So I've already grabbed my watercolor paper here, and I'm just using some cold press watercolor paper, and it's just some scrap paper that I had laying around. And we're just going to place our snowflakes on our acrylic block, and we're going to Versamark and just press down randomly. So we're just going to place these wherever we think that we would like them. They don't have to be in any particular order, just making sure that they don't go over each other. Now here I'm just switching to another stamp set or stamp, and we're just placing them randomly. Now I'm using some cold press watercolor paper here. You don't want to use hot press. Hot press paper is more for the detailed work of your watercolor, like I do with the flowers that I share on Instagram. We want some cold press. Cold press is for when you use lots of water and you want a loose, flowing watercolor picture. So I just used some white embossing powder, and here I'm just quickly hitting it with the heat gun. And we're just going to continuously go over until it's completely melted into the paper. And I'm using some fine embossing. So I'm using the very fine stuff because the snowflakes are pretty detailed here, and we really want to make sure that they show up beautifully. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the little snowflake here, because now I can see that, hey, I kind of missed a little spots, and I think we need to fill in where some of the bigger snowflakes are, so we can add a couple of the little snowflakes here. So I'm just going to hit it again with some embossing powder and again with the heat gun. And now I'm just going to grab my heat gun one more time, and we're just going to hit that real quickly. This one won't take very long because they're so small and easy. So we're just going to push this over to the side here, and now we're going to start watercoloring. So just grab your markers. We're using peacock feathers and cracked pistachio, and I'm also using a nice super thick brush here. So I've also grabbed some watercolor here, water, and I'm using the swag on the side here, and that's one of my new little things that I've bought. It's great. I absolutely love it. So what we want to do here is we want to get the watercolor paper wet. We don't want it dripping wet, but we do want it wet. I personally don't like to use painter's tape, but a lot of people do. So if you are one of those that really like it to keep that completely flat, I don't, because I just use my fingers and it's just a little tiny card. I don't feel like I need to. So you can either hold the paper down with your hand like I am here, or go grab some painter's tape. If you're going to use the painter's tape, please make sure that you make your card width a bit wider so that you can tape the edges down. That's really a key for using that painter's tape. Here I'm using the exact measurements. So we're going to start with our peacock feathers, and we're going to apply that in the center, and then we're going to move that ink around, as you can see, going around every single edge of those snowflakes and just pushing that ink out. Now my watercolor paper is semi-wet. It's not very wet. As you can see, I continuously dab off with my watercolor brush. You can use a lot of water here, or you can do what I'm doing. I don't use a whole lot of water, because if you use a lot of water, you're not going to be able to put that marker straight onto that paper, because distress markers don't like the tips of the brush don't like it to be wet. If you're having a hard time with that ink flowing, grab a scrap piece of paper and get that ink flowing once again, and then try to apply it again on the watercolor paper. Or you can just wait a little while for it to start to be a bit damp and not be so wet. As you can see, every time I'm doing this, I'm also dabbing off on that watercolor brush. I don't want that much water on my watercolor brush, nor do I want on my watercolor paper. And because the cracked pistachio is a very light color, you're going to have to apply quite thickly around the edges of the snowflake, as you can see what I'm doing here. But then continuously just blend it in while that ink is still wet. We really want to make sure that we're working in segments, not the whole entire paper here. and just keep going through and applying that distress marker ink here, and we're just filling in those white areas with our marker, and it just really blends beautifully. That paper is still wet, and so it has a natural bloom to it as already. So that watercolor brush just needs to move it around just beautifully like this, and you can continuously apply that color. Now I'm going over just about the whole entire paper here with my watercolor brush. You can see as I'm going over the whole thing, and that's because we want that to be a very even distribution of watercolor. So we want the whole entire thing to be covered with ink and with water, and you can see how it just naturally just blooms. We don't want any hard edges here, so that's why we're going over the entire thing all together. And there you have it. Very quick, very easy, and a fun and beautiful background snowflake tutorial. Here on the left, you can see I kind of did little lines, and I did my brushwork a bit different. And you can see on this picture right here on the left is where I did it a bit darker. So you can continuously go over and over again with those two colors to create a very rich and beautiful watercolor paper background. So I really hope that you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And of course, you can find me over at my online classrooms where I give free in-depth tutorials from start to finish. I hope that you've really enjoyed today's quick tutorial, and I look forward to talking to you soon.